and do the most we can not to determine how we tell our own story by this external pressure. So just to illustrate, I think that us as Africans, there's ways in which societies have functioned, businesses have worked. So I would like to say the first step is renouncing these stories, is making a choice to say, I will no longer live by this. Now, that's, of course, a privilege of not just, by the way, the affluent. It's just a mind. It's a choice that you make. And I can illustrate this for people who choose to live differently in the quote-unquote poor. It's the definition of poverty, for example, how the poor are defined. Traditionally, it's access to water, it's access to medical care, and that access to water, medical care is a particular system of access to water, access to medical care that has been given to us. How do we reimagine these things? My argument is, let's start with our own stories. Let's dig deeper into what has formed us, both acknowledging the external box in which we've been forced to live, but is it possible in attempting to renounce? And it is a process, it is a journey.
When I did medicine, and almost all of my colleagues who did medicine stayed in and around Ireland or the United Kingdom, and there was only a very few of us who got outside the box, if that's what you call it. But I think my way of thinking at certain times in my life, you realize that you're being steered along a certain path. You know, that you have a career in medicine, and then you get a mortgage, and then you get kids, and then you just get pushed along. And I think at some point I decided I didn't, I was going to do my own thing. And then I realized that, and so which meant coming to Uganda. But then I realized after that I had to keep making those decisions. And that's why, I talk about seasons of your life and stuff like that.
Sorry, when you say you had to keep making those decisions, which decisions?
It's very easy to get into any system, whether it's a career pathway that everybody's taking, whether it's a business thing that everybody seems to be going that way, whether it's expectations of your family or your, So, I mean, a lot of people just thought I was mad. They just thought, well, you can't do that. But when somebody says to me, you can't do that, and sometimes it's my own family. Really? That's exactly why I'm going to do it, to prove you to you.
So what you're trying to say is the process is endless.
It's endless, yeah. It doesn't stop
at once, and then you're out.
It doesn't stop. It keeps, because you I mean, to be a bishop and be in that system. So in other words, you climbed the greasy pole to get to high level. Because when you're a bishop in Africa, you've sort of made it. And then to opt out and go into, civil society now, the sort of stuff that you're doing, where, as you said, people say, but you're not supposed to be doing this. I think you keep needing to challenge yourself. What is it for me now? And I'm sure you'll do that right through your life as well, because it's not as if you're on some sort of a career path now. What you're doing right now, I believe you'll do for a couple of years, and then you'll move. You'll decide what's the next thing. So I think if we, all of us, in the light of the context that we're in. So for me, I think this whole idea, I see it as a doctor. I see it in demography, and I see it in terms of need in healthcare and education, or the lack of. If we keep growing this population as we are without meeting the needs, educational needs, healthcare needs, needs of people to have a livelihood and to build and to make their families, I don't know the end of it. To me, the end of it is just, so I need to then keep, at least for me, saying, well, what can I do that can focus my energies on doing my bit to help this thing, to give people opportunity. And I don't know how long that'll go on for, because I also thought that, now that I'm in my 70s, well, no, I'd like to now coast in close to the finish line. But then I realized that no, actually, there are still things that you have to make decisions about, and sometimes when you make those changes, they're not easy. That's but that's not just being swept along by the system. But I think your point as to when you look at the podcasts and you see some are 100 times more viewed than some others, and there's a throttling back going on. There's a lot of that stuff goes on in our lives as well that we're not even sometimes aware of. And then the other thing is we all have biases. So our biases will...
Oh, sorry. I just want to help our viewers know what you meant about by the viewership. If you look at our YouTube channel, you'll see that some videos get over 1,000 views and some get less than 500. And what he's saying is that's what the algorithm is doing. So if you're looking at YouTube, you're seeing what the algorithm wants you to see. And we don't know why it doesn't want you to see certain things.
But this is a big worry for me. Let me say a concern, because I think I may well be dead before it really happens. But the effect of artificial intelligence and of big data and algorithms and of the control on our lives and our thinking and all that, it's just happening so rapidly, present time, and serving the interest of a mega rich elite. So look, the other thing I was thinking about was how rapidly people whom I would have said were good people have moved their position because of Donald Trump. And I think Donald Trump is motivated by his ego, and there's various simple things. I've read books. His sister is, I think, a psychologist, and she's not his sister, his niece. And I've read some of the things about Trump, and his view of life has actually served him very, very well.
Ian, what you're doing to us
What do we do?
is you're going to make it difficult for this season to be
watched.
YouTube is
Please just proceed. Lucky for us.
I'm just needing to say that so that
lucky for us, I found a solution.
You get my point, though.
Yeah. But I do want to make a point about this. So this guy, where his life, when he did Apprentice, a lot of things that he's done at the right time, the right place, and he's been fabulously successful. But I wouldn't say he's a good man. If I look at various American leaders, he's done some good things. But what has really surprised me is how quickly other people like J.D. Vance and so on have changed their views and just gone along with Donald Trump. And I'm kind of like, wow, as human beings, you talk about being part of the system. If your system is a autocracy, or let me say, or even what would you call it, pseudo democracy, if your system requires that you please the big man, Donald Trump or whoever it is in your system, we adjust to it very fast. Very fast. We become part of that because we realize that's where our bread is buttered on, and it's the forces of good who will still say, but this is not right. Who need, if they get suppressed, I'm just reading this book about the Roman Empire, about the various emperors, and they went from a sort of kind of democracy under Julius Caesar to this whole thing of one man rule, the emperors, and if you read some of the speeches people made, pandering to the emperor, praising the emperor, this is just human nature. This was happening 2,000 years ago, and it's happening today. It's happening in America. It's happening in Africa. And we as human beings, we adapt and say, well, this is how we survive.
It's there's a thread, I think, in the way in which you speak about making the choice, and Ian tells us his own story, of the choices he makes along, and that those choices must be made literally on an everyday basis, in which you choose to say, no, what is not what ought to be. And we are constantly seeking for that, which works for the common good, for the good of others, and so on. I mean, people are shocked when I am in a meeting and I say to them, my first degree is physics. It's what? How is that possible? So I think this idea of defying systems needs to be a character of how we live if we are going to be part of that future that works for others, defying the system. So the point you make about yourself, you defy, you simply make a choice. Yes, I'm trained as a doctor, but that's not the last word on my life. So yes, I did physics. Yes, I was doing a master's in physics when I quit and went into theology. And it's like, all right, I realize you can't actually be a good theologian if you don't understand politics, because theology is deeply political. Have you noticed? We can't avoid having conversations about politics, whether it's Donald Trump, because I have personally come to the conclusion that these narratives that dominate are essentially of two kinds. They are both about power. The first is the power that governs, dominates society, which is politics. Number two, that puts money into the pocket. So business and politics. And I think that's where we need to look and watch. Are we part of a political system? And I'm not talking about political system simply in terms of democracy, whatever. I'm speaking about that system of thought, those narratives that dominate, dominate us. And I think the question you raise, how then do we get out of simply being locked into these systems into which we were born? Okay, I was born into this Western education system that says you're doing physics. I was on a path to be a lecturer at Makerere University. I was in a staff development program, and people who looked around me, you have a great future as a professor of physics. And I'm like, actually, I think about my own life, and I don't think I can make a good professor of physics. That's not my field. But the physics was an essential part of my own story. I don't deny that, but it propels me to the next step, which was getting into philosophy, which was getting into systematic thinking. I then get into it, systematic thinking. My degree in theology was systematic theology, and I then literally get disgruntled by it. I realize that this way of learning the world that systematizes, it is essentially learning the systems that have been created by other people, systems of thought. And to be able to say, no, actually, that is how that frustration led me to wanting to study history. So I decided if I was going to do doctoral studies, I would have to study history. So I think the other thing we must learn to listen to is our bodies, our resistance within us. This is not working. This is not good. And I think that those internal, what would you call them? That internal resistance. This is not working. Why should I stay with it? And I think constantly, somebody said to me many, many years ago, the language, the 7 last words of a dying organization, of a dying vision, this has never happened here before. Anyone who says that, this has never happened here before. The 7 last words of a dying country, a dying system, a dying organization, a dying individual is to be stuck. And I think what Ian says, listen to yourself and say, no. Adopt a life of defiance of systems that dominate. And I think to interrogate the patterns of power that these systems, and this whole thing about domination, you must go this way. Businesses, and I think back to the nation state, I think what's actually happening, David, is that business is showing how irrelevant the nation state is. The biggest businesses today are not within borders, national borders. They are not about your passport. They are not about. So the business is changing the nature and the value of the nation state. You know, these mega rich men, I mean, my own view, they are part of the biggest problem of our world now. They are much richer than continents put together. So it's not locked up in a nation state. So all I'm simply saying is the nation state is not working. You know, when COVID hits, what does it do? It shakes the nation state system. The nation state system is not the answer to dealing with COVID. So I think the earlier we realize these things are not working and be more intentional, the point that Ian makes, be more intentional in reimagining a future, in reimagining the way things can be. And I think that that's urgent. It is especially urgent now because if we submit ourselves to the forces of nature, the obvious path is going to be unbelievable violence. So my last comment on this one is that actually there's a way in which crises wake us up. They shake us. They shake you. So the rebellions of the younger generation are honestly good for Africa. They are shaking us to be able to realize this thing is not working. So crises are an essential process. Unfortunately, when we choose not to see, when we choose not to hear, either our own intuitions, or that which is around us, what Ian says, look at the massive poverty that surrounds these pockets of wealth